Hi, my name is Peter Rich. I am a professor of instructional psychology and technology at Brigham Young University in Utah. I work with BootUp as an external evaluator to research the effectiveness of their programs. So, what I'd like to talk about here today is a little bit about some of the data that we've collected over this past years. We, as BootUp, has worked with AcadeMir charter schools. The data, there's three types of data that have been collected: the teacher experience data, uh, their evaluation of their boot up experience, as well as a little bit of data from students where teachers have given some surveys to students at the beginning and the end of the year to be able to look at their changes. So I want to start off by looking at who are the teachers that participated in this study. First of all, you can see at the beginning of the year, I had 53 teachers complete the pre-survey. This is a survey that was given at the beginning of the first workshop. And then at the end of the last workshop is when the post-survey was given. You can see that I had 36 teachers complete the post-survey. These teachers are fairly younger, on the younger side as far as teachers go. When you look at the average age of teachers, where the average years teaching was about 8 years to begin with and 7.5 to end with, which means that we lost some of the more experienced teachers in that group of 16 that didn't answer from the beginning to the end of the year. You can see that they're fairly new with coding, with about a year of experience under their belt prior, year and a half prior to this experience with BootUp. A little bit more in the demographics. If I look at their racial and ethnic makeup, the vast majority of the teachers are white and Hispanic. So you see that 24 overall are Hispanic, 27 are white, and then we do have a couple of black or African American teachers and teachers that put themselves in the other category. When we asked the teachers why they participated in the boot up trainings this year, the majority of them also indicated that they were told that they had to participate. That just helps us understand where teachers are coming from as they participate. 4 of them were ones that heard about it and asked if they could participate it in terms of the ones that responded by the end of the year. A little bit more about teacher demographics. You can see here the vast majority of the teachers from AcadeMir are classroom teachers, so it means that they're generalists. They teach a lot of different subjects, and coding gets one that they would then have to integrate into the things that they're teaching. So there's also the district instructional coach, and the tech and computing teachers did complete these surveys as well. So this kind of gives you an idea at the end of who participated. So let's get into the teacher experience. I like to start off by hearing from the teachers. One of the things I ask at the beginning is, what was your thoughts, or what were your thoughts about learning to code in the elementary classroom before learning, participating in the boot up experience? And this teacher here kind of gives a good sort of comparison of the before and after. She says, when I heard the word coding, I thought it would be impossible to teach my students how to do it. By the end of the year, she said this: after attending the training and learning about the Scratch Junior application, I'm sure that my students will be able to learn many things using the application and take their imagination to another level. So you can see the transformation in this teacher. I actually have the data here for all the teachers and their before and after. Each line here is from the same teacher. So for example, here you can see the top line, teachers saying they were unfamiliar to they became more confident, apprehensive to excited and confident, hesitant to confident and having fun, going from no experience to feeling very comfortable, not excited to they can incorporate into any of the subjects they teach, intimidated to confident, impossible or hard to this is spectacular and how can I integrate it, didn't even cross their mind to we love it, reluctance to more at ease, non-existent to amazing. You can see here as we go back and forth, this is kind of the thing that a lot of the teachers were saying. They went from a place of not really excited or not knowledgeable or hesitant about coding to a place of excitement, knowledgeable, and seeing that it is valuable as they learn to code. You can see here on the last screen, there were some teachers actually indicated at the beginning that they weren't necessarily hesitant or ignorant. So you've got a teacher here saying they were neutral. They also moved to more confident. A teacher who was good to begin with and saying that she really enjoyed it. Another teacher who said it was interesting to begin with, and now they feel good about it. Curious but nervous went to confident, and excited but nervous went to excited and not nervous. So regardless of where teachers were starting from, they indicated that by the end of the year, after participating in the BootUp trainings, their attitudes had changed towards coding in, I think, some pretty qualitatively significant ways. So this is kind of hearing from the teachers' voices. A lot of the other stuff I'll present here are going to be some quantitative data as we look at the numbers and break down their experience. So one of the things that we look at the end of the year is how often teachers taught coding. And you can see here we have a nice normal curve as far as how often teachers are doing it. The vast majority of the teachers here in AcadeMir reported that they're teaching about once a month. There are 11 of these teachers who responded, so about a third of the teachers who responded at the end of the year are now teaching it at least weekly. This is a good sort of shape of the curve. If you look at this, I would hope that this would shift to the right as teachers become more familiar and more comfortable with coding. I find in my experience, and I failed to tell you some of my experience, I've taught coding to elementary teachers and elementary students for about the past 15 years. I teach a couple hundred pre-service teachers every year how to code. And I would say in my experience, one of the things I see is that when teachers begin to teach weekly, that's where I really see a lot of the confidence and the competence grow for coding. So this is, again, they're on track for good change. I'd love to see this track move over to the right as they get into doing more coding over this next year. One of the questions we ask as well is how much they integrate coding with other subjects. And I look at this in two different ways. So one is by using the mean. That's the average in the way that a lot of people often think of the average, just adding up everybody's scores and dividing it by the number of people. And you can see here, when we look at it this way, they're integrating coding in all of your core subjects: language arts, social science, science, mathematics, with at least 1.5 to 3 lessons in science actually throughout the course of the year, which is fantastic. I also like to look at the median. I think with the mean, sometimes we see teachers who are doing more integration. They tend to pull up these numbers. And so the median gives us more of a look at an average across all teachers without one teacher having more weight than the other. So when we look at it this way, we see that math and science is where teachers have been integrating coding over the course of this past year. A little bit more in science than in math as far as we look across that. So that's where the integration is happening across the subjects, and that hopefully, again, as teachers move to teaching coding weekly, you would hope to see this grow over the course of the next year. A question that we ask as well is how well teachers feel supported by their community, right? And I apologize, I realize here I have the wrong acronym up at the top. This should say AcadeMir, but this is the AcadeMir data. On a scale of 1 to 10, we ask them how well they feel supported by BootUp, their instructional coach, other teachers at school, their principal, the district, and students' families. Typically, you're looking for things 7 and above on these 10-point scales. You're kind of in an okay range. From 7 to 8, you're in a great range. From 8 to 10. 6 to 7, there's room for improvement, and then below 6 is maybe room areas to look at and areas of concern. And so, as I look at this, one of the things I see is that the teachers here in AcadeMir, they feel supported by BootUp, their instructional coach, and their principals. So those are all great. They're basically their support structures are areas of support that they feel. They don't feel as supported by other teachers at their school, which is interesting, and even less supported by students, families, and the district. So this may be an area to look at in terms of the community that surrounds the teachers in terms of the support for teaching coding in the classroom. The district especially, so that might be something to look into and to see why they feel that way. And when I say the district, in the case of AcadeMir, it would be the charter school network. In terms of successes and challenges, I asked teachers what was their greatest success this year and what was their challenge. They answer these in open-ended questions, and then I go through and I categorize all of their answers. I've put up here the top 3 categories of successes and the top 3 categories of challenges and the number of teachers who indicated that was their success or challenge. So you can see here that far and away the most common success that teachers see with coding or saw this year was interest from the students. These are comments about student engagement, students being excited and having fun when they learn to code. And that, again, 16 of the 26 teachers who responded to this question, you can see that's where they really focused on, is the idea of students being interested in coding. 5 of the teachers focused on student ability. So there's their actual skill level with coding and how that's increased. So overwhelmingly, when teachers talk about successes this year, they're talking about it in terms of the students. And so we actually see that with the way that teachers are talking about the students in the classroom. Integration just has to do with the fact that their success is that they did get to integrate it with other subjects. Their challenge, overwhelmingly, their main challenge is their own ability. That's what teachers see as the thing that stopped them the most. We do also see the 2 common challenges that I see as their second and third most common challenge, which is resources. This has to do with whether or not the technology is working or it's sufficient for their needs in order to teach coding, and of course time. There's always a lot of teachers who comment that they just have a difficult time finding the time to teach coding in the lessons that they teach. But again, the thing that prevents them the most, or the challenge that they most had this year, is their own ability to teach coding. That's where they felt like that's what was stopping them from succeeding more. So in the pre and the post assessment, teachers respond about 30 questions, and those 30 questions break down to these beliefs that they have about coding and computational thinking. This is on a 6-point Likert type scale. The bottom of the scale is strongly disagree, and somewhat disagree, and a 1, 2, 3. And then you've got the positive side of that with 4, 5, and 6, with somewhat agree, and strongly agree. So these value statements are 10 statements about the value of teaching coding to children. These have to do with things like all kids can learn how to code, all kids should learn how to code. I believe that coding is helpful for children in their future careers. You can see teachers started off on the positive side of this. They were not quite all the way to the agree on all of those statements, but you can see by the end of the year, they actually showed significant growth in this, statistically significant growth, and it's about 10% growth overall that they went from where they were seeing the value of coding. So that's great growth here, and now they agree with all those statements about learning to code. I think those numbers reflect what we were seeing from teachers saying in their initial comments about their coding experience with BootUp this year. As far as the CT questions, these are questions about teachers' ability to think computationally without talking about coding. So things like I can identify, I can solve problems, I can break a difficult problem down into its parts, I can, let's see, what are some of the questions about CT? I can identify patterns in data. So you can see they started off agreeing with these statements and they ended in the same place. This is statistically and for all intents and purposes, this is the exact same spot. So we don't see any change there from the teachers from beginning to the end of the year. They still feel confident in their ability to think computationally. Where we see a lot of the change is their confidence to teach coding and their confidence to code. So coding is questions that are specific to their coding knowledge, things having to do with sequencing and conditional logic and variables and loops. All of these things have to do with coding. You see, they started off disagreeing with the statements, or somewhat disagreeing with the statements about knowing how to code, and now they're on the somewhat agree side of that. So they're still for growth, as one of the teachers said in her before-after statements, but they have flipped from the negative side to the positive side of that. And they're actually a bit beyond that somewhat agree, and working their way towards the agree on that. Hopefully, as they code more and teach coding more frequently on that weekly schedule, if they're able to get to a weekly schedule, we'll see that 4.2 get up into that 5 range. And where we see the most growth is where teachers went from somewhat disagreeing that they could teach coding to agreeing that they could teach coding. And that's a fantastic flip as they go from not sure at all, not confident in their abilities to teach coding. These are questions like, I can help students debug their code. I know where to find the resources to teach coding. And so this is where we see a lot of the growth is in their confidence to teach coding. We also asked teachers about their feelings and their attitudes for coding and computational thinking. Just on a 1 to 10 scale, you can see here at the beginning, their confidence to teach coding was pretty low, 3.5 on a 1 to 10 scale. And now that's at almost a 7.5, right? That's fantastic. Again, anything above that 7 range is what we're aiming for, and as we look at these 10-point scales. So this is great. They started off somewhat excited to learn to teach coding, and they ended out more excited, which is great. They had a bit of anxiety, but not a lot to start off with, and that's gone down just a bit. I wouldn't make much of the anxiety there at all because they just started off below a 5 to begin with and ended below a 4. So their anxiety is going down, their excitement has gone up, and their confidence has gone up. And this is all indicating good directions for where teachers are at. So one of the questions we want to know is what was their experience with BootUp trainings? As we look at the experience with BootUp trainings, we ask these questions. These are questions that Amazon Future Engineer program asks of any of their programs that are participating. And so these are on a 5-point or a 10-point scale, and they just wanted to know what is their satisfaction with this experience. And you see teachers are about around a 4.5 on all of these answers, which is great. They're satisfied with their BootUp experience, and they felt that their students were, and probably more importantly, they feel that the majority of their students belong in CS. There's also a thing called a Net Promoter Score, which is how likely they are to recommend it to their peers, and teachers rated that as an 8.4 out of 10. Again, those are great numbers and indicating towards good directions for that. So one of the things we wanted to know as well is BootUp did do both online and in-person trainings. And you can see here, on average, teachers reported attending about 3 trainings in person and 1 training online. So we wanted to know what was their preference. The majority of teachers, or most teachers, indicated in person or they liked them the same. There was a handful of teachers who liked it online, and their reason for liking online was the convenience, or they found it easier to focus. The in-person teachers who liked the in-person, they cited peer interaction. They liked the interaction with their peers quite a bit. And a number of teachers in this group also mentioned the ability to get help when they were in person. They felt like that was much easier than when they were online. A good number of teachers, though, did indicate that they liked them the same. And they said things like both of them were engaging, and I was able to focus regardless of which format I was doing. So it just kind of gives you an idea of their preference for that overall experience. You can see here, one of the teachers, she says, it allowed for hands-on coding experience with the easy access of assistance or help from others who are fluent in coding. So that was her in reference to the in-person experience. So we also asked teachers to give students 2 surveys, once at the beginning of the year and once again at the end of the year, to be able to see how they changed. This surveys they're called the Elementary Student Coding Attitude Survey. It has Likert type questions on that same 6-point scale. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to complete, so it's not very long, but it measures students' attitudes. The idea here was to see if students' attitudes towards coding changed from the beginning to the end of the school year. We also asked teachers to give them the computational thinking test, which is probably the most commonly used test around the world to assess students' ability to think computationally. So this is a cognitive test, whereas the SCAS is an affective test. There's 28 items, 7 groups of 4 of items, and it has students solve problems. It does take about 20 to 30 minutes to complete. I'll say overall, you can see we didn't have a lot of teachers give out these tests before and at the end of the year, but you can kind of see here at least the racial and ethnic breakdown of the students who completed the tests before and after. This is for the Elementary Student Coding Attitude Survey. As we look at this and break it down a little bit more, you can see how long it took students, how many students actually completed the surveys, and how long it took them to complete those. Again, not a lot of students in each of these groups, so you have to take this data with a grain of salt as I look at this. If I look at the pre-post with gender breakdown, you can see here it was about evenly split, especially in the post. And the post really in this SCAS was just, I think, one teacher who gave it to 2 classes, and she had about an even number of boys and girls. So you can see here as we look at those overall demographics, there were some teachers as well. I'm looking at this data, and that's my gender breakdown. This data, I think, is actually from the CTT breakdown. I apologize. This says SCAS demographics, but this is from the computational thinking test. So I didn't have the same teachers complete the CTT as the SCAS as you look at this. So fourth graders mostly completed the SCAS, fifth graders mostly completed the CTT pre and post. So the SCAS has 6 different attitudes in 6 different categories, looking at their confidence to teach coding, their interest for coding, the utility value that students see in coding, their perceptions of coders, their self-efficacy for math, and the social value. All of these things grew just slightly. None of these growths are statistically significant. There was a statistically significant drop in students' interest in coding, and that was curious to me. And as I looked into the data, I think one of the issues here is there's just so little data in the post that it makes it hard to make too much of this data. So I would say over the course of the year, I didn't see a lot of growth in students, but probably the biggest problem was just we didn't have enough teachers give out the survey. So I would encourage you, as you continue to teach coding, to be able to give this survey out both pre and post. And I think we'll see some different changes in students' attitudes towards coding. So in terms of the computational thinking test, breaking it down, you can see again who took this and which students really completed the test and what their scores were. If you'll remember, this is a 28-point exam. And so the average scores typically, I would say, for fifth graders tend to hover around 11 to 12 points to begin with. And you usually gain a point or two per school year. So you can see here, I really don't have usable data until I look at fifth grade, and the fifth graders started off at about 11 points, so about where I would expect them to start off with on this exam, and actually they grew to 13 points. And of all the data I have on here, that is the column, or the row rather, where I would see, I would trust the most because it's the most reliable, has enough data to actually make these assumptions. The 6th, 7th, and 8th grade data, because there's so little in the post data, I hesitate to make too much of that. But I would say we saw some cognitive growth definitely in the fifth graders, gaining about 2 points on this exam, which is that's a pretty good gain from the beginning to the end of the year as we look at this overall. So they did grow in their ability to think computationally, at least as measured by the computational thinking test. So that's about all of the data that I have for AcadeMir. Hopefully this is helpful to you as you look at this and is able to spur some important discussions. I would say teachers are headed in the right directions. They had a great experience this year. They're excited for coding. They're more confident for coding. They still have room to grow in their confidence to code. They definitely grew most in their confidence to teach coding, where they're now agreeing with statements about their ability to teach coding. I would love to see them teach more often, where they teach coding weekly. So somehow integrate that into a weekly activity that they do. I think as you do that, you'll see both teacher and student growth. But of course, you won't be able to see student growth unless teachers actually administer those assessments both pre and post. So if we are able to get more teachers to give out the elementary student coding attitude survey at the beginning of the year and the end of the year, as well as the CTT, I think we'll be able to see both cognitive and affective growth in the students as well, as long as they're coding at least weekly. So hopefully that's useful to you. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me, and you'll be able to do that through BootUp. Thanks.